Meeting for Interim Studies for Common Education Committee. Unfortunately, Representative Baker is caught in travel between Philadelphia and here. Therefore, as Vice Chairman, I'll be running the meeting this morning. First presentation that we'll be getting started with is Supporting Family Choice Within the Oklahoma Public School Systems. Representative Daryl Fincher is running this interim study, and at this time I'd like to hand the reins over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry I didn't have my microphone ready. Thank you all for coming and for being willing to give up your time. We have a list in here of people. We will be running on time. Representative Van Buren will actually be showing times as we're running down. Make sure when you give your presentation that you leave with some time, 3 to 5 minutes for questions at the end of that. One of the reasons I did the family choice within public schools is part of the issue is whenever people talk about choice, about where they go, the discussion always seems to revolve around how do we move kids out of the publicly funded section and then use public funds to send them to private options, whether it's virtual, whether it's vouchers, whether it's tax credit, scholarships, or even education savings account. And those have been covered quite a lot. But one of the things I wanted to do was give schools an opportunity to tell how they're enabling choice within their public schools here. And one of the points we also want to make is that people don't know schools have changed. Many of us envision schools as what they were when we were kids. They were kind of, especially if you're a little bit older, they're kind of boxes where kids sat in rooms. That is not the school of today. You have more choice in there. We're not in the schools of 2009 or even the schools of 2015. And so this is an opportunity for schools to get up and various organizations to talk about how that has changed. Our first up will be Mr. Brad Clark of the Oklahoma State Department of Education, and he will be discussing just some of the overview of what the state laws are that guide what choice looks like, which are under control of the state and which are global choice. Mr. Clark, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Representative. Good morning to everyone. I think the task was to give a brief overview of 5 to 10 minutes of some of the currently existing options within public schools in the state of Oklahoma. This will be, as best as I can, limited to 5 minutes as requested. With that said, it's a very surface level review. For any other questions, happy to answer any of those as always. So here's just a quick slide on various options that just combing through Title VII pulled these out. On open transfers, I think it's important to note at the outset that oftentimes this may not be seen as a choice that currently exists to families in the state of Oklahoma, but it is a choice option, especially with the open transfer. Open transfers up until May 31st of every year, an application can be submitted for an open transfer. If an application for an open transfer is submitted, the approval on this end is just the receiving school district. The resident or sending school district is involved in a sense, but on the approval side, there's no involvement from the sending school district. This open transfer statute, and I will note at the bottom right portion of the slides, all of the statutory citations are listed. Siblings, foster care, and or a parent who's employed at the school district, those children may also receive an open transfer. And there is a limit of 1 transfer per year. So jumping from transfers, I think chronologically in the statutes, I tried to go that route. Charter schools were the next creation around 1999 and 2000. Charter schools very fundamentally are a public school established by a contract. Who is the contract with and who's it between? Key terms in the Charter Act. You have an applicant and a sponsor. Talked about this briefly last week at the other interim study. The applicant can be an individual or it can be an entity. Most often the applicant is organized as a 501c3, but that does not have to be the case necessarily. The applicant will submit an application, 34 enumerated items in statute. What has to be in this application, submit that to a sponsor. Sponsors in the state of Oklahoma can be a public school district, higher ed institution, career tech, tribe with sponsorships, State Board of Education, and statewide virtual charter school board. And I said last week, the whole premise behind charter schools was to provide additional flexibilities within public schools, but in exchange for those flexibilities, the back end is to have heightened accountability. Empowerment schools, going forward a few years, I believe this was 2012 or 13, first created in statute. The whole premise behind the Empowerment School Act, again, 70 OS section 3-129.1 and the following statutes, is to really get out of the way of local school boards, to enable and empower local school boards to make decisions based on the needs of their students, eliminate any of the red tape, and enable the decisions to be made as locally as possible with flexibility. So what flexibilities do we have? Starting out with some key terms, the empowerment school can be an empowerment school, can be an empowerment zone within a defined geographic boundary, or it can be an entire school district. That flexibility does exist. An application is submitted, so whereas in the Charter School Act, the application is between a third party and, let's say, a school district as sponsor, in the empowerment school, the application is from the school district to the local board of education. That is one difference. Empowerment schools can apply for exemptions from any and all statutes and rules that a charter school has flexibility from. Those will be set out in the application. The most recent application we've had on this, just by way of example, encouraging, again, those local decisions based on student needs. We had an application from Tulsa Public Schools that was phenomenal within the last year. It was developed over a year and a half with widespread community support. It was amended from time to time based on the feedback from parents, teachers, administrators, the whole spectrum of the community, and that was approved by the state board. Talking about particular needs of students within this particular empowerment school zone that was requested, the needs of these students was to go to school on Saturday for one reason or another. That was the identified need, and there was evidence to support that. Currently in statute, to go to school on Saturday, you have to have a waiver from the State Board of Education. Well, this is an example of getting that red tape, so to speak, out of the way. This application is in existence for 3 years, and they can go to school on Saturday without having to apply to the State Board of Education. So from the empowerment school, let's talk about conversion schools. Conversion schools are within the Charter Schools Act. They are not charter schools. But the definition of a conversion school is that it's a traditional public school site that is converted to access any and all flexibilities that a charter school has. And recall the sponsorship with the charter school, a third party to a sponsor. The empowerment school was the district to the district board of education and then to the state board. With the conversion school, it's a plan that's submitted by the school district to the local board of education, and once approved, it's approved. The state is out of the way. Again, these schools can access any and all of the flexibilities that a charter school is authorized to access. Some characteristics that remain the same with conversion schools: funding and enrollment. So resident student enrolls, applies to enroll, automatic enrollment. Supplemental online courses, this is defined in statute as well as administrative code. The idea behind this, I believe, reading the definition, is to supplement a student's education through online coursework. The courses are approved through the statewide virtual charter school board, and a student can access up to 5 hours of their school day through supplemental online courses. And then finally, magnet and enterprise schools. I will admit I've looked and looked and looked in state law, and I do not find this anywhere in state law. I think it was derived out of federal law over the years, and it's really a local district determination. If they want to do a magnet or an enterprise school, there are some similarities between the two, there are some differences. I believe that we have 2 districts in the state of Oklahoma who currently have either magnet and or enterprise schools, those being Tulsa and Oklahoma City. they are largely application and contract schools. So there are similarities to some of the other designs that we talked about. Application and contract, and then enrollment for students is based on applications. If it is based on applications, some of the things in looking at those two districts is policies. The applications require test scores, GPA, attendance, recommendations. And if it's not based on an application, the schools that I've seen use a lottery. So we have a capacity of, let's say, 300. We've had 400 applications. All students go into a lottery, and then that's how the enrollment is determined. So with that said, that's the end of my remarks, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Thank you, Mr. Clark. I turned it off so you wouldn't hear my keyboard's clicking. At this time, I don't have any additional questions. Does anybody represent Mr. Chairman?
There are half as many Democrats here today. We're going to ask twice as many questions.
Didn't know. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the initial ideas with this wave of education reform was that good ideas developed in charters and magnets, et cetera, would be developed in laboratories and then transmitted back into the larger system. Do we have any sense that education innovation comes from all of these new programs and nourishes the mainstream? For example, easing restrictions or regulations in certain areas in general public schools so they can function using the same tricks that the new schools have learned. Do you see that happening?
Thank you, Representative. Yes, I think it's going to be on a case-by-case and perhaps even a community-by-community basis. What works in the design in Tulsa may not fit the need of the community in Oklahoma City on the empowerment school. And that, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Follow-up?
On follow-up, thank you. Can you give me an example, for instance, of how charter schools, magnet schools, enterprise schools have brought new innovation back to the education center, that is, changed the way your traditional public school is laid out?
Sure. The first example, I think, is with the conversion schools. We have several that are applying. I've mentioned Millwood in the past. I think Judge Interim was here. Cleveland Public Schools is another good example of going the conversion route to access some flexibilities. I don't know the specific details of all of those flexibilities, but I do believe that they have looked at attendance policy or online instruction as one of those options that best fits their need.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Clark. If there are any additional questions, we're out of time for that. Please hold them till the end. I've allocated some time at the end for general questions. Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to introduce Dr. Pam Deering of the Cooperative Council for Oklahoma School Administration. Dr. Deering.
Good morning, Representative Fincher, and thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this discussion this morning. We thought it would be best, as we looked at our landscape of schools in the state, to give you a perspective of a couple of schools. You have one on the agenda this morning, which will be Dr. Esbolt from Cleveland talking in a smaller rural school, a smaller rural school offerings, what they can do for our family options and choices. So we thought, again, we would look at a larger school. So we're pleased to have John Federline from Union Schools in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to talk about what they do in Union Schools. So if I may yield my time to him, I would love for him to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Deering. Mr. Federline.
Representative Fincher, Representative Van Kuren, appreciate the opportunity to be here today and talk about school choice and what it looks like at Union Public Schools. I agree completely that schools do not look like they used to. Students and families have a wide variety of needs. We have an extremely diverse school district. The handout that you have in front of you have a few statistics about Union. And in our district, we recognize that students have these hugely diverse needs, and we want to be responsive to that. We want to be forward-thinking and try to make sure that Union is a place where all families who live in our districts have everything they need to not only meet their needs, but also that they get a very high-quality education and they're prepared for college and career when they leave. You can see I have a list here, different things. Some of those things you're very familiar with. A lot of different high schools offer them. One of the things that we started this year is our 100% virtual program. For a long time, time we've had virtual learning where students could take a blended model. They could take a few classes at the high school, and then they could take virtual classes. My daughter graduated last year. She took 2 hours of virtual classes. It was wonderful for her, especially being a senior. She was able to go and check in once a week or so, and as long as her grades were up and she was doing her work, she had a great deal of autonomy to work on those classes virtually from home. She still had teachers that she could go to if she was having any difficulty, and a lot of school systems have that model where it's a blended model of virtual education. This year, to be responsive to some of our families' needs, we went with a 100% virtual program. We've got about 35 students enrolled in that right now, and this allows students that are enrolled in the Union District to take all of their classes from home if they so choose. This is many of the families that have enrolled in this program, they've been homeschooled. And homeschooling for a lot of families is wonderful in the younger grades, and as they start to get up into algebra and some higher math, and they've done a great job, and their kids are really ready for some advanced things. The parents may not have the resources or the knowledge to teach that effectively, and so they can come to Union and take all of those classes online. It's a very rigorous curriculum. They're able to work through this at their own pace. They do a very similar schedule, semester to semester, but they're able to work at their own pace from home. We are available. Teachers are available by phone, by email, and they can come up to school if they want to. The other great advantage of our virtual program is a child that wants to work from home and this is available to grades 6 through 12. If they want to work from home, but they also want to be involved in theater, in fine arts, in athletics, in band, in orchestra, one of our co-curricular offerings, they are able to do so. They are able to take all of their academic and their elective classes, and they can come up in the afternoon and play football. They are enrolled as a Union student. They've got a Union ID. They can participate in any and all of Union's co-curricular activities. Not only the formalized ones like football or band or orchestra, but also prom and some of our dances and things that we do that. So it's the entire high school experience. They can participate as much or as little as they'd like. And like I said, this is our first year, but so far it's very successful. And we're really hoping for some higher enrollment as we go. Another program that we started 2 years ago, early college, high school. You've got some information there on your handout. We are very proud of this. First school in the state to do this. We've got some dispensations from the Oklahoma Regents for higher education, allowing kids to start college classes as sophomores. And we have our first cohort as juniors right now. And those kids, after next year, when they graduate from high school, they will also graduate with an associate's degree. This is a program that specifically targets kids that have sometimes had barriers to getting into college, first generation college students in poverty, and this program has just been amazing. We've got a great partnership with TCC. We'd like to see this program expand across the state to other schools, but what an incredible opportunity for kids, and what a great savings for parents for them to be able to go to high school and get an associate's degree, to leave high school with not only your high school degree, but also your associate's degree going into college and career. We've also, on the vocational side, we've got a long partnership with Tulsa Tech. We have a Career Connect program that I briefly mentioned here in your handout that allows students to work with business partners around the city of Tulsa. Within our partnerships, we've learned that our businesses in the Tulsa area have a huge demand, an ever-growing demand for skilled labor coming out of high school. This labor that doesn't necessarily take a college degree, and we know that not every single kid is going to go to college. We want to make sure that they have got a great pathway when they leave us. That when they leave with our high school diploma from Union High School, that's their first step. We call it commencement for a reason. Their commencement, they're commencing the rest of their life, and we want to launch them wherever direction they want to go. Our Career Connect program is pretty rigorous. It allows kids to get some certifications, some OSHA, some safety certifications. We have several kids that have started work directly after graduation. This isn't just like a job shadowing program. This is kids actually going and learning. Our education foundation pays for about 20 pair of steel-toed boots and safety gear and OSHA certification stuff for these kids every year. We want to make sure that if they're going on the career path, that they're ready to go, and we're great educational partners within our city. We've had concurrent enrollment for a long time, where with TCC, where kids, and a lot of schools have this, where kids can take high school classes that count for college credit. College algebra is a great example. Freshman comp is another great example. These college classes that virtually all freshmen have to take. Our concurrent enrollment program means that you can come to Union High School, go to all your classes, and then your 5th hour is your freshman comp class taught by a TCC professor. And when you take that class and pass it, you get credit not only for your high school senior English, but also for freshman comp at TCC. So that's a great way for parents and families to save money, and great ways to expose kids to the college experience and what we need there. I won't read through the rest of this, but you know, it's very important for us at Union to do things right and to make sure that families have every choice they could possibly want. Public education is such a privilege, and we want to make sure that the students that come through Union Public Schools, that their families have every possible choice that would be offered in private or charter or anywhere else. That if it's working from home, or if it's working virtually, or if it's brick and mortar, if it's co-curricular activities, whatever the opportunity is, we want to provide it at Union Public Schools. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Federline. Just a quick question. How often do you run into a situation where a student or family requests one of these options, but you don't think it's a good fit, and how do you go about addressing that?
Representative Fincher, we vet all of our applicants for these programs very carefully. One of the things that we wanted to make sure of our new virtual program is that students were already academically successful. What we have found in our blended virtual programs is that kids that don't do really well in a regular classroom, oftentimes they don't have the motivation or the wherewithal to work on their own, to be motivated to work on their own. So what we look for is a great parental support system. We look for some evidence of academic success. We talk to the student, and then we make that decision. There are often times where students have applied for this, and we have guided them in another direction, and their families. Ultimately, it is their choice, and you know, we want to make happen what they want to happen. But eventually, they kind of self-select into the most appropriate places. We do have alternatives for kids that try a program and it's not for them. We've got other alternatives for them. One of the programs that I didn't put on the sheet that I should have is our alternative education program. Started by Richard Storm. Chris Ducker does it now. A lot of times when we think of alt ed, we think of kids that have discipline problems. That you've been suspended a couple of times, we're going to stick you over here in alt ed. That's not what our alternative education program is about at all. There's a long application process for both parents and students, pretty rigorous academics. They have an adjusted schedule. You can go on blocks. You can make up some credits a little bit faster. They've got blended virtual over there as well. And it's an incredible opportunity for kids that don't really fit in with a huge building of 3,300 kids to be in a smaller environment to get some more one-on-one instruction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll recognize speakers or questioners.
Any questions? Representative Provenzano, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Go Union. With regard to your new virtual program, when can students enroll in the virtual program? Is it all year long or only at certain points?
No, our virtual program, students are allowed to enroll at the beginning of each semester, much like college, where they would enroll either early in the fall, August, or at the beginning of the second semester, early January, late December.
Follow up.
Okay, thank you. And then, so say someone transitions at semester, or someone goes to, like, in January, is there a transition conversation that happens to prepare them?
Absolutely. We have an incredible team of counselors that are responsible for transcripting grades, and whether they come to us from another school district or whether they come to us from within Union Public Schools, we sit down with them and their parents and the counselor goes through their transcripts and talks about exactly where they are, exactly what they need to do in order to graduate. and we talk about, what is required in the program. Like I said, we like to get that buy-in from both parents and the child to make sure that everyone is on the same page about the level of rigor and the level of work that this is going to take to be successful.
One more follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And finally, I know it's a small population, but of those 30 to 35 kids, how many actually are connected to extracurriculars? Are you tracking that?
Yeah, right now, I want to say the number is 6 that are participating, and I think all but one of those is in orchestra, and then we have one that's in marching band.
Any other questions? Seeing no questions, Representative, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. One of the things that you talked about, and I knew this when I looked at your program several years ago, is you talked about the students have trouble, focusing and how you help them, on the virtual because maybe they just aren't in that mindset yet. One of my questions, though, is any student who graduates and goes on to any sort of formal education or any sort of post-secondary certificate, whether it's a trade school, a career tech, junior college, or anything like that, college, they're likely to run into online education, and they need to have those skills. How do you help them develop those skills?
Well, we have, 2 years ago, we piloted a one-to-one program with laptops for our freshmen. This year, we were able to give laptops to all of our students 9 through 12. They're on a student management system that we'd invested in even years before this, where our teachers have gotten used to it. And so what we train kids for is that virtually all of their work, even if they're a traditional student in grades 9 through 12, is done on and through Canvas is our student management system. And they go through that. The assignments are done through that. It's a huge paper savings to us, and they're used to working in the digital and the online world. That's we've got a college and career center, and one of the things that they talk about extensively is how you are turning work in and how you're being held accountable online is very similar to how you will, what will happen to you in the workforce or in college, because it's a digital world. We want them to be prepared.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fenderline. Any other additional questions? If you'll stay around towards the end, we can ask them. At this point, I'd like to recognize our next speaker, who is Mr. Jason Midkiff of the Oklahoma Public School Resource Center. Thank you, Mr. Midkiff.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Representative Venture, for the time today. Today I wanted to highlight some of the different schools throughout the state and some of the different things that they do locally to make them maybe just a little bit different. The first one is just a traditional public school that I think most of us are aware of. Most of us went through. These includes our pre-K through 12 districts, and then also our elementary districts just serving pre-K through 8th grade students. Vast majority of our students are in this system and going through it. The next one is a school within a school. So these districts have populations that just go to, they're either on a different schedule or they're in a different location, but they're still on the main campus. Examples of these, Okmulgee has what they call an ACE school, Bristow has an Inspire Academy, Tulsa Hill has Hail Beyond. The blended learning model, mentioned colleague over here. This is where students are going to combine, so they're going to have learning that's more personalized, learning management system, things of that nature, but then they're also going to get some of their education in the traditional setting. At Purcell, where I was a superintendent, so a lot of our core classes, when we use this model, would be online, so math, algebra, geometry. Teachers would be assigned to them for that. But when they went to Spanish, they went to Ag, they went to those classes, those were in a traditional setting. So it's kind of called blended because you blend together some online virtual learning with getting in the classroom, having that peer-to-peer contact, collaboration, and those things. The Summit Learning Platform, there's several schools throughout the state, in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, that use this model. This is kind of a learning management system within itself, Summit, that was created. It combines a personalized learning platform, but then the students will come together and do project-based learning. And so it combines those two so that some of the concerns with personalized learning is the kids on a computer, they're by themselves, they don't have contact, they don't know how to work with other people and have those skills. And so this tries to make a hybrid of those. John Rex Charter School, Tulsa Central, Tulsa Memorial, Tulsa Met, and then the elementary school, Tulsa McClure, are some of the examples of ones that use this. It comes with the platform, it comes with the teacher resources, has a lot of things with it, and then they work through that. And the teachers have a couple times during the year that they go and have their meetings to work through this platform. Districts that have a focus on internship and career pathways, these are settings where the emphasis is on workforce skills and experience. These are districts or schools that will partner with businesses or colleges. Some of those examples, Santa Fe South Pathway, their students use Summit, and they also work with OCCC to try to work through their associate's degree, similar to I'm talking about it at Tulsa U. Sharon Mutual has an interesting program out there that they do. They had a really good story there at Sharon Mutual. They had a gentleman that had a house that was in the family, didn't get used. He donated to the school, and those kids rehabbed that whole house from electrical to plumbing to sheetrock and all those things to give those an experience. At Purcell, ours was kids on our personalized learning pathway, able to go out to the hospital, go out to different businesses in the communities. If they had finance was on their mind, and we set them in a bank, they got to go through, work as a teller, have those experiences. They'd work so many hours each semester. Then they had to come back and do a presentation, able to do that presentation with some of our local representatives and senators there. And then those kids had to give a feedback on how that drove their decision on their career that they wanted to do. So did it change their work? Did it change their college? What they wanted to do in the future? Did it give them more experience and solidify what they wanted to do? Okmulgee also has an internship in career pathways as well. An immersion school, these are typically schools that really focus on one topic or discipline. Generally, that is a language. So most common, that is a language school. So these are the ones listed here that I'm aware of in Oklahoma. Generally, it's either the Cherokee one, which is for their native language, and then Spanish and French is the most common. Asked a little bit about school choice awareness. It's just through my experience, dealing with our districts and things, that generally that school choice awareness is within a school. So that school tries to maybe get the word out, for lack of a better term, of people that are in their district. I don't think the majority, especially our traditional public schools and those, go out and advertise in other communities and things like that. The majority of the school choice is done through parent-teacher conferences, enrollments, counselors letting students know of different options, and just general school announcements to kids on different pathways or different things that are available, or different choices within a district that they can do. Take any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mr. McKiff. I do have one. When you talk about school choice awareness, I think one of the challenges that schools have is actually making parents aware. Do you know if they feel that their outreach to their community is sufficient, or are they always looking for better ways to reach out and let people know of the solutions?
I think parent communication is just always a way of trying to find a new way to make sure that everything's communicated out to different people. While Facebook is a norm today, it's not that everybody gets on it at every time of the day and checks it. So trying to get things enhanced, trying to let kids know. We know kids don't always get home with the information. So it is a challenge, and I think school districts are always looking for different ways, different mediums to get that information out to their parents and students on what different options there are, whether that's even just, hey, you can go concurrent here, you can go to VOTEC, just making all the kids aware of the different options that they have is always a challenge, I feel like. Or has been everywhere I've been, I'll say that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Provenzano, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about the school within a school concept, in particular the Tulsa Beyond, Hell Beyond option. My question, if I understand correctly, the students receive instruction for their core classes all in one room and it's all online, but then they travel to their elective classes and their sit-in classes, the way it was explained to me. And I understand that the core classes, they try to keep those class sizes very low, like 15 to 20 to 25. Have you had any reports of that affecting the class sizes of the electives as a result?
I am not specifically familiar with that school. I think that's on a case-by-case basis. A lot of times, those classes, a lot of times your electives are a little bit bigger anyways. And so I don't know about that school specific, so I couldn't answer to that specific school. But in my experience, it's not made our classrooms any bigger with people that I'm aware of. Sorry, I couldn't be more specific.
Representative Walden.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a two-part question. First of all, do we see any correlation between any particular innovation schools of the types you just described and improvements in their school report card? That's part one. And part two is, to what extent are these ideas transmissible to the rest of the school system? That is, the larger public schools. Do they learn and borrow innovations from these schools?
So the first part, we try to, at the Resource Center, use NWA and map some of our schools, and we have seen that some of those programs have really had an impact. Recently had several schools that received awards, even nationally, for the growth of those students in those programs. As far as transitioning that over into the public schools, we always need to be finding a way to innovate schools and keep things up and make sure they're relevant to those in the traditional schools. And my knowledge, they're all trying that, and that's a struggle every day with what they can do with the resources that they have.
Recognized for follow-up.
Thank you. Then I guess my last question is probably particular schools are able to develop innovations that improve their school report card, but for whatever reason the resources aren't available in other school districts. Does that adversely skew the data? Some schools are performing better because they have more freedom and opportunity to do things than other schools. Is that a problem with how we track and report our schools?
Are you talking about the A through F, or are you talking about local growth?
In particular, yes, the A through F.
I don't know if I would be the one to be able to really answer your question on the A through F and how those innovations impact those scores. I don't think I could honestly answer your question on that.
Thank you, Mr. Medcalf. I appreciate it. If we have any additional questions, we'll be able to answer those at the end. And thank you for coming and spending the time to talk with us. I'd now like to ask Dr. Rebecca Wilkinson of the Statewide Virtual Charter School Board to come up and talk a bit about what the board does and some of the options that students, that families have. Dr. Wilkinson, take it away.
And thank you for allowing us a few minutes to share a little about the work of the Statewide Virtual Charter School Board. Just to clarify the board's work, I think the board's duties kind of fall under their mission. The mission of the Virtual Charter School Board is simply to support education choice for Oklahoma families through online learning opportunities. And as described in their duties, which I know is very small, their duties are related to full-time education through virtual charter schools, and their duties are related to the support and certification of online courses, contracting for fair price for all Oklahoma schools on the supplemental online course side or on the part-time online side. So we do work related to students enrolling in charter schools for that online education and students whose best choice is to remain in their local school community while also having access to another option through online programs. I did reference this study last week, so we'll not talk about it in depth, but if we're talking about supporting family choice, then we need to understand the families that are making these choices as best possible. So there is a study at the link provided at the bottom of this particular slide. We wanted to know why so many families so quickly, it seemed like the growth of the virtual charter schools was expanding so rapidly. So why did we see in such an unusual manner the growth of virtual charter schools, and then what were the benefits and the challenges? And as I mentioned last week, families are making this choice for a large variety of reasons. School safety was mentioned more often than the other choice. The benefits are the flexibility, the ability to meet a really specific need of a student, and the challenges were the transition, moving from a traditional school into a full-time online environment. I did want to reference a parent if we're talking about supporting family choice. Colleen Cook, for several years, has been the chair of the Oklahoma chapter of the National Coalition for Public School Options. Recently, she was named the president of the national organization. She is an Oklahoman. She is a veteran, and we have a lot of military families who access online education for their students. She is a taxpayer, and last session she openly supported the passage of House Bill 1395. She believes in accountability, and she believes in transparency, and just like all taxpayers, wants her tax dollars being spent wisely. But she does talk in this statement, and I won't read it, but she talks about the necessity of options for parents. And she talks about how it is not an easy choice for most families to make, to leave their local school district, to do something different. But she is very clear in her last statement that Oklahoma has trusted parents for choice and must continue to do so in the future. So this has kind of been a part two. There's a general idea of what the Virtual Charter School Board does in its support of full-time and part-time online learning opportunities, but Representative Fincher did ask me to also speak to virtual charter school attendance this morning. So I'll begin by just saying that as of July 1, 2018, there was a new virtual charter school attendance law. So we are just now beginning the second year of this particular law. Basically what it says is that there are 3 pathways that a school can choose to track the attendance of a student enrolled in a virtual charter school. So a student is considered in attendance if they are present at least 90% of the days within a quarter. They are considered in attendance if they are on pace for the completion of that course. You know, most courses have a pacing calendar, and are those students completing that work and on pace for completion? Or if they have completed no less than 40 instructional activities within the quarter of the academic year. If a student doesn't meet that particular criteria, then there is a second portion of that law that says that you record attendance in proportion to those 3 pathways. You know, if they weren't in attendance 90% of the days, perhaps they were in attendance 70%, so they would receive a 70% attendance for that particular quarter. The same kind of proportional practices for B and C as well. There is a description of C, instructional activities. It's a broad description. It talks about how an activity could be actual coursework completed, how it could be a log on, it could be a communication. But that is the new attendance law that was put in place. I will tell you that there are some who
think that maybe that is a law that we should rethink, that we should reconsider. I am always hesitant to say, you've had the law for 1 year, let's change it, because sometimes we don't give things the opportunity to see if they're really working, if they're really doing what they should do. But I have talked with school leaders of the virtual charter schools, and I will tell you that among those school leadership, there are some that are concerned about C, the 40 instructional activities, that perhaps that is too vague. In fact, just let me make sure I'm using their words instead of mine. For example, Cheryl Tatum is advocating for that perhaps that 40 assignment language should be removed, but also in advocating for maybe that to be removed, she equally advocates for the legislation to consider something in relationship to engagement. You know, we know that there are a lot of families that come to the virtual charter school for a good purpose. There is a sense of work ethic with the student. There's parent support, and those students are doing well. You know, we don't want to take away from those students. But we know that there are some students who come to hide out. I don't know of a better way to describe it. And so maybe they aren't missing 10 consecutive days, allowing the school the opportunity to drop that student and hopefully get that student back in a better match for them. So but maybe they're showing up every 8th day. Maybe there's, you know. So how do the virtual schools legally, ethically, and in the best interest of that student address that idea that some students are simply hiding out and not getting what we want them to have? So I appreciate that she's willing to step up and say, you know, maybe that 40 assignments should be eliminated, but let's think about the broader problem as well, and that's what steps can you take to ensure that if a student chooses full-time online, that they are really engaged and in school. I will tell you that I also talked to Bryce Adams. He's the Senior Director of State Relations and Policy for Connections Education, so he's representing Oklahoma Connections Academy. They also believe that the C, the 40 assignments, is a little vague. They are more in line with the pacing, you know, as students in attendance, if they are pacing through the course. And we wouldn't want any kind of attendance law that stifled that flexibility piece, because we know a lot of families need that particular component in virtual education. So we just urge you to think about flexibility, and then to consider what is really appropriate for attendance in a virtual program. Dr. Daniels in the next interim study is also going to be talking about what is appropriate for attendance in the supplemental program, in the virtual courses that are being taken in other online venues. But also to really consider that engagement piece. We don't want students hiding out, so to speak. I wish I had a better term for that, but I can't think of what that is right now. I also looked at some of the state policies. We're not just grappling with what should attendance look like in a virtual environment in Oklahoma. States are grappling with it across the country. There are some who have attendance measures, either the same as or very similar to what's expected in a brick and mortar school. There are some who allow the districts themselves to set policies as to what attendance should be. School states that allow the authorizer to set the policies for what attendance should look like. So they're varied. I didn't find any particular pattern among most states, or not a lot of research to back up what attendance should look like. That is one piece that's missing, is that collective body of research regarding online education to guide policy. I saw my sign, so I'm going. I forgot to click, I'm sorry. I think I went too far. Do you want questions now, or I have one closing statement? I will leave it to you, Representative Fincher.
If you make a closing statement quick, that would be.
Well, I did want to just read one paragraph, because when I was in a school teacher, a principal, when I was a superintendent, I knew my families, I cared for my families, and that's the same when you begin to get out in the virtual environment. And every month I tell student stories at the board meeting. You know, we're concerned about the quantitative data, but these qualitative stories bring that additional picture that's needed. So while most students are served best in the traditional school systems found in communities across our state, there are students who benefit from alternate education environments such as online learning for either all or a portion of their schoolwork. Those family stories have been shared and include a teenage boy with a strong work ethic competing nationally in the rodeo circuit, a beautiful 6th grade girl with severe spinal cord difficulties, a single mother battling cancer while caring for her 2 elementary-age sons, a boy with a significant hearing impairment who simply needed an additional computer speaker to achieve academically, a mother who recognized in her sons signs of pedophilia behavior and bravely sought the best learning environment for him and others while seeking help, a rural student whose small school district did not offer upper-level math and science courses, an Oklahoma missionary family serving others through clean water initiatives, and on and on. I won't continue the rest of those stories, but there are valid reasons why families do choose online education, and those opportunities should be supported.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. I don't have a question right now. I may have one at the end, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. Thank you for coming up. I'm sure we'll have questions later. And for those who are hanging around for the second interim study, we'll be delving a little bit more into blended and virtual learning, well, for an opportunity to discuss that in more depth at the schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I've asked Dr. Aaron Espel, Superintendent of Cleveland Public Schools, to come up to discuss some of the great things that they're actually doing with blended and virtual learning, and he's brought a team with him. I will let him go ahead and take it away. I've asked him to kind of do the cleanup on this. When he's finished, he gets 15 minutes. We'll have time, extended time for question and discussion of any of our presenters that we have. Take it away, Dr. Espel.
Well, thank you, Representative Fincher. I would just like to take a little bit of time to introduce who I have with me. Again, my name is Dr. Aaron Espel. I'm the superintendent at Cleveland Schools. I have the director of both our virtual and blended programs here, so questions may be fielded for people who are actually in it daily, and you may have to be able to direct questions towards them. But real quick, Representative Fincher asked me to talk a little bit about what we're doing in a small rural school. I have about 1,600 kids, pre-K through 12 in my school district, and so we're not as large as Tulsa Union, we're not as large as some of the others, but I do think that public schools in Oklahoma can do what we're doing, and many are at a high quality level. And so as we kind of go through it, I wanted to talk a little bit about why we decided we wanted to do what we're doing. In no way, and I want to be very transparent up front, in no way did we ever design our blended program or now our fully virtual program with the intent of we need to gain attendance or we're losing too many kids to statewide virtuals or anything else. We did it basically because of what we started this conversation with. Our students are different. For anyone who thinks that in a traditional public school that students are the same way they were 30 years ago, 15 years ago, or 5 years ago, we're being naive about who we're trying to educate. And so you can see some of those reasons that we truly believe at the core values of Cleveland that we try to educate our students because of these reasons. We know that we live in a digital age, but what does it mean to educate in a digital age? And so also we tried to give a little bit of that autonomy and that ownership of education back to the student. We think that's very important. For many, many years, public schools thought that we held the keys to the kingdom, we hold the knowledge. Almost any student with a cell phone can Google any information quicker than you can relay that information to them. So again, we have to understand that we are not the only ones that have the knowledge any longer, that we have to give those students the ownership of that knowledge, and how we do that is giving them the ownership of their own education. And the difference between internal and external locus of control. And we know that if we can allow students to have that internal locus of control, that ownership, that onus of their own education, they're going to be more successful. Because they're going to take more value into that education, and they feel like they're driving it rather than that sage on the stage driving their education for them. And that's something that we hold very dear to our core values and our beliefs and our mission at Cleveland Public Schools. So as we look at it, we call them our options. They're layered options. We want to be able to provide any type of option for any student for an educational environment. And so we start with our traditional brick and mortar. I won't go too much into that because I don't call it a traditional school. And the reason we don't call it a traditional school because even the things that we do in our brick and mortar schools aren't traditional in the sense of what we did 5 years ago. So I'm very careful about the language we try to use. I use the word traditional because you're familiar with it. We call it our brick and mortar school. And again, we truly believe, due to the equity of what we are able to offer our students, that the traditional brick and mortar school is the best place for our students because we can meet the needs at a higher level for any type of student that comes through our school system. So I'll be first to tell you, even though we have all of these options, and I've had the pleasure of going around the state talking about many of the virtual and blended options, we still believe that our brick and mortar schools is where we would like to see the students come, just because we feel like we can serve them at a better rate than allowing them to go in a different setting. Our second setting is kind of what we call the hybrid, a mix between fully virtual and our brick and mortar, and that's called blended. You'll hear us even this morning and this afternoon when we speak about our blended model, call it CPAC. It stands for Cleveland Personalized Academic Center because it is truly personalized education. This is our third year of doing that, and we've been relatively successful, which we'll get into a little bit of the stats here later this afternoon. And then this is our first year of having a fully virtual option, our Cleveland Virtual Academy. It's the first year that we've been able to have that, and we'll talk a little bit about why we decided to start that virtual academy as well. So we have 3 options within a public school, and the intent and the only reason is because we believe that there's an educational environment that fits the needs of those students, that not every student's going to fit in the same hole, and we have to be able, as a traditional public school, to be able to meet those needs just like we meet the needs of anyone else. So to talk a little bit about our CPAC, again, this is our blended model. We want to have a highly engaged but also a highly effective program. We don't believe that we should just be able to just say that we have a program. We want to do it at a high expectations. We'll talk a little bit about kind of the models that we use to not only build our program around, but also how we evaluate our program this afternoon. So again, I hope that you're able to stick around and listen a little bit more in detail about that. But for a small rural school, we're able to offer many more electives. We were talking about just your core classes, and we don't believe that we offer just our core classes. Through the LMS learning management system that we use, we're able to offer almost 200 courses to our students that in a rural school you're not able to access. And there's ways that we're able, and like Mr. Clark said, ways that we're able to do that and be able to present that to our students. We also have our own design. These things are occurring and happening across the state, and we're encouraged by that. But again, what we do at Cleveland may be different than what they do at Bristow. I know for a fact it is different from what they do at Sand Springs. And so I think traditional schools are kind of trying to be innovative in their own sense to develop what works for their community, because that's what's important. And we also allow students to kind of guide their own path. We allow them to pick their own subjects that they're interested in. And for example, for our brick and mortar students, this is the kind of math that you're going to take when you're a freshman. This is what you're going to take when you're a sophomore. This is what you're going to take when you're a junior. And when they're able to be out in CPAC, the options are endless for them at that time. And so it just allows a lot more autonomy for them to be out there. If you're asking yourself kind of who is out there in CPAC, who do we serve? And you can see there in the slides that's hanging, we serve about 60 kids from all walks of backgrounds. And so we don't want this to be just our high achieving students. We don't want this to be just an alt-ed setting. We don't want this to be just for extracurriculars sense. It's whatever fits that need of that student, if that is the right place for the student. And so we interview not only the student, we interview the parents, we interview teachers. We have a committee that selects. We have about 60 out there right now, with about 30 on a waiting list. And it's grown every year. Our high school has just a little bit over 500 students in it, 9 through 12. And so if you do the quick math, it's about 20% of our population who would choose that setting. Just because they choose that setting doesn't necessarily mean it's the right setting for them. And again, we have that communication with the parents because we do believe in offering those options to parents, but we help come to a setting that fits them. And for the most part, they've been very, very successful out there. And we'll get into our completion rates and our ACT rates and that kind of stuff this afternoon. Then our CVA, our virtual academy, again, it was first year in existence, and it was done not because our brick and mortar schools haven't been successful for kids. We believe that we offer a tremendous school option through our brick and mortar, and we believe that we offer a tremendous school option through our blended. But there was still a missing gap. There was still an environment that wasn't being met, and that environment is home. And what we had to learn as a traditional brick and mortar is no matter how well we do traditional schooling, no matter how well we do blended, if it doesn't meet the need of that student, then we're not necessarily going to be able to be successful for that student. That's why it was created. And so I want to be upfront with, and it's not because of attendance, it's not because we're trying to skirt anything. We believe that public schools have the ability, because we're used to accreditation, because we're used to the state standards and the different things that we do, we can offer these settings at a high level. And I also deeply agree with what Dr. Wilkinson said. There are people and students and families who need that option. Traditional public schools just haven't been offering that. Well, now we are, and we're playing catch up, and we're coming up to the kind of, the learning curve has been pretty sharp for us. But it can be done in traditional public schools. I think that's what's important, and that's what I'd like to advocate for today. Again, as I kind of go through this, there was simply a need. We surveyed our students. Over 10% of our student population, our virtual school, is elementary all the way up. So we start in kindergarten, go all the way through 12th grade, even though that we don't necessarily encourage the elementaries for social skills and different other obvious reasons. It is an option for them because it's definitely based on what that parent needs and that student needs. We believe very strongly that we designed a program that is community driven, that we want those students to be in their home environment, but also supported by their home school. That's important, to have that sense of community for them to ultimately be successful, whether we're just talking about social skills or academic skills or whatever else. They need that sense of ownership. And we believe that we can do that. And so some of the ways that we do that is not only do we hire a local teacher, we have a full-time virtual teacher who runs this program for us and meets with those families, meets with those students. It's not just, here's a Chromebook, we'll see you in May. It is definitely an interaction between the two, but we also provide transportation to them. We provide food service to them. We provide our extracurriculars to them. And we have students, and Mr. Beatty could tell you a little bit more than I, but we have students who come in and eat our breakfast and lunch, even though they're fully virtual, because they need that support. We have students who have some transportation needs who need that support. And so again, we're able to do that because we're a community school, and we're able to offer those things for them. We have students who come in and are involved in our extracurriculars because they want that social interaction, and that's important to them. Just the environment wasn't right. We utilize our local resources, such as our libraries, such as our businesses, to make it a little bit better. We bring in guest speakers and do workshops for those students. The virtual setting shouldn't be seen as necessarily how many students do you have in the program. That's not necessarily what's driving if it's successful or not. What we like to say is that meeting the needs for 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, it doesn't really matter. When I say that we have 30 kids in our program for Cleveland, it's not that we're excited and bragging about that we have 30 kids in our program. Look at our attendance. It's about we've met the need for 30 families because we've interviewed them. We know that that's the right setting for them, and that's where they need to be successful. And this is really what sums it all up for us. If you want to look at student success, then you look at all of those parts and put it together, and that's what makes student success. Student success cannot be driven by just a Chromebook or a technology piece. It cannot be driven by just an at-home learning environment. It has to be driven by a full package, and it has to be driven by what makes the family and that student and the school system successful. And we believe with all of that, all of those pieces put together, we're able to do that. So at this time, Representative Fincher, I appreciate it and answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Espel. Mr. Chairman?
Questions? Representative Rosecrans, you're recognized.
I just haven't heard my voice enough today. I'm just kidding. No, I have not heard about Cleveland. I know where Cleveland is. I went to the wedding. It's way out there. This is innovative, and I'm very, very impressed. My question is, it looks like you are going around and trying to kind of spread this model around the state. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and follow.
Hold on.
Can you come down to my district?
Absolutely. And so we're able to, of course, we have schools that come and tour, and we're open to that. We've had 2 schools last week. We have another school set up this week that comes into our programs. We work closely with COSA and their guidebook and their framework going around this summer and being able to present on, because again, I want to ensure that I get my message across as well, that anybody with $1,500 in a Chromebook can start a virtual school. That's not what we're advocating for. What we're advocating for is that traditional public schools can do it, but you have to do it right and you have to do it at a high level, and there's a way to do that.
Representative Johns, you're recognized.
Yes, I'm the one over here.
Okay.
Financial impact, starting these things, what's the financial impact?
Yeah, you have to budget it. You have to make it a priority. The way that I answer that to my local school board is we make Friday night football a priority. There'll never be a time in Cleveland, Oklahoma that we won't have Friday night football. If we can make Friday night football a priority, we can make blended learning, we can make virtual school learning a priority. Is there a financial impact? Absolutely. We're providing technology, we're providing hotspots, we're providing full-time teachers. But again, if we budget it, then it will be that priority. If you wanted exact numbers, I can pull those for you. I don't have those today, and I can get it to you, but it is a cost to the district. This isn't a money-making thing. Education shouldn't be seen as, is it a financial gain to the school district? It is, are we meeting the needs of our students, and how do we budget that and prioritize that to make that work?
With less than 1 minute, Representative Walden, you're recognized.
Representative Jones asked my questions. Great lights to come.
I have a question. I see on here where you say you have your own design model, and you said that Bristow is not, Sand Springs is not, Cleveland. So do you see that as a strength, or is that something that we may need to see some consistency, congruency across the presentations?
I absolutely see it as a strength. I think that each community is going to be different, and there has to be flexibility given to that school district to be able to follow that flexibility. I think there needs to be guidelines, and 3, 4, 5 years ago, there really wasn't any guidelines to make this a high-quality program. I think COSA's done a lot of great work through their work on a guidebook to help schools like myself do it at a high quality. But I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all model that serves each school district and community the best way. I think that there has to exist flexibility within guidelines.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question. Congruency across the market is often considered important. So to make sure that math or whatever, upper level math in Cleveland is the same upper level math in Bristow, Sand Springs, is there a recommendation you would have where we could see a way to make sure that what's being presented is consistent?
Yeah, I think absolutely you can look at your growth models, but I think you can look at your benchmarking models. I think you can look at some of your state testing models as well. But again, before we get too far in the data, are we doing what's best for the kids? And I think when you answer that question first and foremost, is that kid receiving a high quality education, and how can you show that Cleveland Public Schools? Then I think you've answered that question.
Thank you, Dr. Espel. At this time, we've finished the main presentations. Now is the time that we have for any general comments or questions. I think it's very appropriate that all the members of the Common Ed Committee who are here were not too long ago standing in front of students in public classrooms. You're talking to them in the principal's office, running public schools. I'd be interested in just hearing, asking any questions, and also just hearing any reactions from any of the committee.
Representative Walden.
Well, as you may have recognized, I was interested in the ability of school choice to lend innovation to and strengthen the overall public school system. Because without a strong public school system, the choices we're creating are carve-outs for a selected group of kids, whereas the Constitution requires us to provide quality education to every child. And I think what we see in Cleveland and Union Public Schools is just the kind of education innovation that can be transmitted across and can be of benefit to every student, not just a select few. One question I have about all of this is that, we always talk about what the data suggests and what these choices have done to improve school performance should all be taken with a grain of salt, though, because in the last 10 years, we've been starving the mainstream public school system of funding. We've seen a teacher exodus, et cetera. So I think we need to continue to embrace the best approaches where we've seen success. And we should see how it does in a healthy school system that's properly funded so that we aren't just making lifeboats for the few, but we're designing a better conveyances for everybody.
Representative Rosecrans, you're recognized.
Thank you for pronouncing that correctly, Mr. Chair.
Been working on that all week. You're just talking.
This is something that's very close to my heart as a former educator as well, that we do have choices. I've talked to so many children who felt left behind if it wasn't from large class sizes. And it was funny, like back in my school, I tried to do this when we had Title I funds and we could do iPads. What a mess, what a mess. So to see this becoming reality and also, becoming a thing, if you will, it's great to see. The main, I guess, concern I have, no, I don't have concerns. I wanted to learn more about community-based schools. You hear that bandied about, and I think Cleveland has done a pretty good. You've done a pretty good job explaining exactly what that is. And yes, it's a smaller community, so I'm not going to say it's easier, of course, but it's just a lot less people. But I think it's something that I'm really interested in looking into. I know Union has done an excellent job with that. I've been meaning to tour, and I apologize, but I hear great things about your school district, and I just want to see that spread around the state. I think that's the main piece that I want to see, equity, and I just want to throw that out there. I don't really have any questions more than just what do we see for the future for community-based schools? If someone wants to answer that for me.
Go ahead. I think I heard.
Please step to the microphone.
Yes.
Identify yourself.
John Federline, Union Public Schools, and I heard the superintendent from Cleveland say that the decisions he is making are community driven. I think that's so vitally important, regardless of the size of the school district, that we as educators have got to be responsive to the needs of our community. We've got to realize that it has changed. It's changed for students, it's changed for parents. A lot of parents right now in our district are watching their kids go through a time period that is very different than how they grew up. And all the media that they're exposed to and all the screen time that they're exposed to, and they're not sure what the best route is. And it's up to us as educators to not only lead those students through that, but also help those parents navigate those waters, to give them those choices, and to make sure that we're being responsive. Whether it's a smaller town or a large urban district, we've got to be very responsive to those needs. We've got to listen to those needs very carefully.
Thank you.
Representative Fincher.
Yeah, that also works. Thank you. I do have a question about attendance because we did discuss attendance. This might be for Mr. Clark. My understanding is we've legislated attendance in the statewide virtual charter schools. To what extent have we legislated attendance for the traditional brick and mortar and the blended learning that are not statewide virtual? Or is that totally up to how each individual school board defines it?
Thank you for the question. I think, so if you, as Dr. Wilkinson said, if you are a statewide virtual charter school board, there is obviously a statute that defines what that policy for each of those statewide virtual charter schools has to be. On the other side, I'll just say for everyone else, there is another set of requirements. But the follow-on question is, what are those other sets or set of requirements? It's a local determination. And so for virtual schools, and I don't want to speak to any of these innovative models that we've heard from this morning, but you might have a local determination that is similar or the same as what the statewide virtual law requires. It could be login times, it could be instructional activities, it could be both. But that is a local determination in this other category. But if it's a statewide virtual charter school, there's a definite statute that defines that. Is that?
Follow up? So, thank you. The question then is, so basically, when we talk about the number of hours, that's the number of hours that a school has to offer instruction. How a school determines whether students are in attendance or not is a local decision.
That is true. So the 1,080 hours or the 180 days is the offering requirement. But there is a local determination, and we do have rules that define attendance. We're talking non-virtual in this situation, as 2/3 of the first half of the school day or 2/3 of the second half of the school day. And why 2/3? Because the standard traditional length of a school day is 6 hours that school is offered.
Representative Rosecrans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's going to bring up another question, maybe for Cleveland and Union and some of these other places. Do you follow the brick and mortar? I'm kind of confused. Do you have the flexibility to do that with attendance?
If each speaker would please identify themselves.
Dr. Aaron Espolt from Cleveland. I would say for our school currently, because I know that there's a lot of work being done around attendance and making sure to Chairman's question that it is across the board so that we can all be on the same playing field. While I believe in flexibility and local control, I believe that we all need to be on the same playing field and that it needs to be equal and above reproach to where there is no different actors doing things that aren't aligned. And as traditional public schools, we are held to accreditation standards. And so for Cleveland, currently, we hold our students to 6 hours a day, and that they have to be engaged, logged into our learning management system, or communicating with our virtual school teacher, or involved in our extracurricular activities there at school. And they follow our current calendar that all of our brick and mortar students follow as well. So we believe that we wanted to create this year until there is a level playing field created across the board that is above any type of reproach. And I can tell you, and not something that we're proud of, but it is a fact. And let's be transparent. Out of the 30 students, we'll have 8 of those students reporting to a truancy court because of attendance in virtual school. Because we believe that those students and families need to be held to the same expectation as all of our other students and families are. And so I say that to not necessarily say that we all know that we don't want to give them a place to hide. It's like Dr. Wilkinson said. And to do that, we check in on them on a daily basis. We log it on a daily basis. And when we do that, we know that we're holding those students accountable, and we continue to communicate with those families of the importance of progress through that learning management system.
Representative Johns, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really encouraged about what I'm hearing with you guys from Cleveland and Union and other places. I love the fact that public schools are providing that option, the virtual option. And I absolutely need to see, I see a need for virtual. As a former principal, I saw that quite often. But unfortunately, like Dr. Wilkinson was saying, a lot of kids and parents looking for a place to hide out. And so that always concerned me when I had a student leave us to go to virtual school. But the other thing that really concern me as well, in particular those kids that wanted to hide out. I had so much confidence in my teachers to provide a positive impact in their character, just caring for them. That's why I hated to lose those kids, because they weren't going to get it at home. And so my question is, and you touched on it a little bit there, but my question is, so if when they're they're going about that virtual option, how often do they come back in contact with those positive role models as our teachers are?
Dr. Aaron Espel, again with Cleveland. I would like to introduce Mr. Saul Bayouth, who is our Director of Virtual, and he can kind of take you through, Representative Johnson, a little bit of the communication, check-in, things that we do at Cleveland to ensure that contact and that care, because we do believe that a high-quality teacher is going to drive any education, regardless if that's virtual, blended, or brick and mortar. We have to have high-quality teachers driving that education. So we wanted to put those safeguards and that constant communication back in place. So, Mr. Bayouth.
It's Saul Bayouth. So it kind of depends for us on how old the kid is. The high school kids are required once a month to come meet with our teacher together as a group. Junior high kids twice a month, and elementary school kids once a week. Those elementary school kids, it's like hands-on activities, maybe STEM related, maybe math or English related. As the older the kids get, it's like the middle school kids last week met to go over some note-taking skills, because that was a skill they didn't have in virtual school. So they met and did like a note-taking workshop, and then she watched them go through some instructional videos and then watched them take notes on their own. The high school kids, a group are going to observe a veterinarian in Tulsa for a couple hours. So the activities fluctuate depending on the age of the kid.
Representative Provenzano, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am heartened by the way I hear us talking about public education, because I think the words we use and the way we're...
I can't hardly hear you, I'm sorry.
Pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm heartened with the language that I hear being used, because I feel like there's been a systematic deconstruction of the view of public education. And so I want to continue and applaud you for your progressive thinking, but also the way you talk about your teachers and the way you talk about your school and the pride that's evident. And I want to encourage you to continue to do that. But kind of tagging on to that, hearing from Dr. Wilkinson about the incredible stories of those who virtual is good for, and virtual has a place here, but also that the majority leave for, lack of a better word, bullying. And I'm curious, if you lose a student to a virtual situation, how much exploration is going on at the level of why are you leaving? And I'll just kind of open that to either of the public school representatives.
John Federon, Union Public Schools. That question about bullying is one that weighs heavily on us. We realize that this is an issue that a lot of families face across the country. In Union Public Schools, one of the ways that we're addressing that is first of all, to address your question, we do give students and their families exit interviews. We talk to them. If they claim a bullying situation, we want to know about it. Obviously, we have our formal bullying investigation, but a lot of times what we'll hear is this has been going on for years, nothing was ever done about it. We really want to dig into that. Whether that's perception or reality, we really want to know. Sometimes we're able to walk through with the parents and say, here's all the resources that we have available. Here's what we can offer you. Here's all the ways that we watch out for kids. And sometimes that's enough to get them to stay, but other times they want to choose that home environment. Their perception is they'll be safer, there'll be less bullying. And so, you know, we want to have a program, our virtual program, that was able to serve them at home if they're a secondary student. Union has created a strategic plan for the next 5 years, and 25% of that involves social and emotional learning. I cannot say enough or emphasize the importance of this in public education, that we all have to step up into this realm. I think 20 years ago, there was a sense of, I'm going to teach, and whoever comes through my door, I'm just going to lay this out there, and whatever your social emotional problems are, that's something for you to deal with, and if it comes up, you're going to be punished by the school. And now our view is there are things that our kids are dealing with, not only in Union, but at every district, that are unimaginable to most of us. And we want to welcome those kids in and say, whatever it is that you've gone through, we're going to deal with it. We're going to deal with it through counseling. We're going to deal with it through education. We're going to deal with it through community resources. Whatever you need in the social and emotional realm, we're going to make that happen. We're doing some extensive training with our teachers. We're learning more about it as we go as administrators. But we want to make sure that that type thing, because what that does for us is it makes us proactive against bullying. A lot of those situations, the person that is doing the bullying is often from a really rough background. And so we want to be proactive with all those kids and teach them correct ways to socially interact, peaceful conflict resolution, all of the things that we would hope that productive citizens would have. We know that we've really got to step into that a lot more.
I have a question for you.
I was going to go ahead and follow up real quick. Again, Dr. Ernesto, Cleveland Schools. One of the other things that, of course, I think if you ask 512 public schools across the state, 512 are going to say yes, that we look into bullying and do those things. I want to also speak to the kid, because one of the worst things I think we've acknowledged at our end is if we allow that student to just go home to the virtual education with no ongoing counseling or anything else, all we've done is taught a student to run from the situation. And so what we also do is follow up counseling, interviews, contact, and that's why it's so important that we have a full-time teacher with those students, because they're able to provide that ongoing support, ongoing counseling, ongoing communication, ongoing check-ins with that student to help them develop some coping skills as well. So as part of our virtual education, that kind of brings back in that community sense that we also provide some counseling and some other things to help those students learn how to cope and to deal with some of those emotional skills, because I think even all of us, if you look at our Twitter feeds or Facebook feeds, we're going to get bullied, right? But it's how do we deal with that bullying as well? And I think that's an important social skill that we have to instill with those children as well, is how do you cope and how do you deal? Because we all want to stop bullying, but it exists, so we don't want that student to go home and never learn how to deal with that as well.
I have a quick question for Dr. Wilkinson. As she comes up, as a 30-year teacher, I wanted to maybe address the hiding portion of what we see as virtual students. Again, as a 30-year educator, I had students in my class, they were actually sitting right in front of me, and they were technically hiding, not willing to do or not wanting to do the assignments. However, it was a very small number, and because it was that face-to-face, I was able to limit that. As we see in the virtual charter schools, as we see numbers at 20,000, possibly 30,000, and even potential for 40,000 students in the coming year, do you see those numbers as a problem as far as being an opportunity for a larger opportunity for students to technically hide or slip through the cracks?
Well, I will tell you that at the August 1st enrollment, which is the last official enrollment we had in the virtual charter schools, there were approximately 18,800 students. That is a large number of students. I'm sorry, I couldn't completely hear because of this.
You're kidding.
Yes.
I've been dealing with this for a whole year, so I understand completely. But do you see the large numbers as an opportunity for more students to hide or slip through the cracks?
Well, I think I couldn't speculate as to what that number of students that might slip through the cracks would be, but I do think it's important that we recognize that today, whether it was 2 students or 20 students or 200 students, we don't want any student hiding out in a system. And what teeth can we give to the virtual charter school that knows that a student may only be showing up every 8th day or so, not ever hitting that 10 days, that we can address it and make sure that that student isn't able to continue to hide out.
For
We
follow-up,
want the child to be in a classroom or in the best setting possible, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
yes, ma'am. For follow-up, would you ever, just your personal opinion, would you ever see a number that would be too great for us as far as virtual charter school is concerned?
Well,
Is it
and I-
infinity and beyond?
As I looked at the research on what are some other states doing, and I won't say it's an exhaustive look, but I do know that there are some states that do set caps on the number of charter schools and do set caps on the number of students who can be enrolled in charter schools, all kinds of charter schools. I think the problem that comes with that is when you say, okay, the first, 1,000 students has a choice, but the student sitting at 1,001 does not. And so you said personally, so I personally struggle with that issue. That 1,001 child is just as important as the first child. It's a tough question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you for your answer.
I would like to just say real quick, though, I don't want anyone to have any misperception. Every virtual charter school student is assigned a teacher in addition to those online programs that they are going through, and there are many, many excellent teachers out in the virtual charter school world serving those students.
Thank you very much. We have now exhausted our time and actually gone a little bit over on our first interim